born and brought up in India. My father was an army officer, and we traveled around a lot. I went to seven schools. I went to university in India at a very young age. I skipped 2 years and went to university at 16 and graduated at 19. It was very tough in the beginning, but once I got through the first year, I haven't looked back. And then I studied in the UK for 7 years. I'm the third generation in my family on both sides to be educated in the UK. Both my grandfathers, my mother, my uncle, her brother, all studied here. And I qualified as a chartered accountant with Ernst & Young in London. And I also graduated in law at the University of Cambridge. And then I came up with the idea for Cobra Beer while I was a student and set it up from scratch, along with a childhood friend from Hyderabad in India, where I was born, and built Cobra from scratch into what is today a household name in the UK, and a brand that is exported to over 30 countries around the world, manufactured here in the UK and in Belgium and Serbia. And alongside building the business, I started getting involved with public service and with lifelong learning and academia. So I'm an alumnus of the Cranfield School of Management, of the London Business School and the Harvard Business School. And my first public appointment was at what was then the Department of Employment, the New Deal Task Force to get people from welfare into work, which then became the Department for Work and Pensions and the National Employment Panel. And then I became a university chancellor. I was the youngest university chancellor in the country as chancellor of the University of West London. And after that, became Chancellor of the University of Birmingham for 10 years, which I greatly enjoyed, a big Russell Group university, top 100 in the world. And I have 2 fellowships at Oxford, which I'm proud to hold. And I'm ambassador for the Chartered Business School of Cambridge and an honorary fellow of my college at Cambridge, Sydney, Sussex. And I'm back to being a student where I'm in the middle of my doctorate, a business doctorate at Cambridge University, and back at my old college, Sydney, Sussex, which I'm greatly enjoying. Apart from academia and business, I've been proud to have been a member of the House of Lords for the past 18 years. I was the third youngest peer in the House when I joined in 2006. I'm still a relatively younger member of the House of Lords because our average age is 71. And it's something I greatly enjoy, being an independent crossbench peer with the ability to take part and constructively challenge the government of the day in so many different areas, and it's a great privilege being there. House of Lords is an amazing institution and has the greatest depth and breadth of expertise of any parliamentary chamber in the world. And every time I go there, I learn. And India has always meant a lot to me. It's a country I've kept in close contact with, including my mother, my brother, my uncles, aunts, cousins, family is still there. So I travel to India regularly. I founded the UK India Business Council, and today I co-chair the India All-Party Parliamentary Group in Parliament. Yes, being a professional resident at St. Cross College, Oxford University is a great privilege, and I'm sharing some of my learnings in building a business from scratch and a household name, Cobra Beer, from scratch. And it's a journey where you have to first start that journey, and you have to make the decision to be an entrepreneur and to go down the entrepreneurial route. In my case, with 2 degrees, including a law degree, a degree in commerce, a qualified chartered accountant, the natural career for me would have been investment banking, mergers and acquisitions, corporate finance. But I chose to be an entrepreneur. And you've got to make that leap and that commitment to doing it. And that takes guts. And it's that word guts, that boldness, that defines entrepreneurs who are willing to take that leap. But also, you have to have the guts to stick with it when others would give up, because it is never an easy journey. It's always tough. It's always against all the odds. In my case, I was up against giants, the biggest Indian beer brand in the world at that time when I started 34 years ago. And today is Kingfisher. And they had been in the UK for 8 years before we started. They were in thousands of restaurants. They were producing Kingfisher in the UK. They had thousands of Kingfisher outlets serving draft beer. And I was starting from scratch with an unknown brand against giants. Carlsberg, the most famous beer brand, one of the most famous beer brands in the world, was available almost every Indian restaurant. So when you're up against giants, and it's against all odds. That takes guts. So you've got to be bold. And the Duke of Wellington's motto, fortune favours the bold, fortune favours the brave. People have the impression that entrepreneurs are big risk takers. And of course, entrepreneurs take risks. What people don't realize is actually entrepreneurs are always taking calculated risks. And the good way to take that risk is to always look at the downside. And you've got to be bold enough to face what's the worst that could happen and not be scared to confront that before you take the decision. And I think that is what people don't seem to realize. But also, I say to students at school, you want to go to university, make sure you study a subject that you're hopefully good at, but more importantly, that you enjoy and that you're interested in and that you love. Follow your passion, not your pension. And the same with a career. Choose a career that you're going to love and enjoy, not just because you might make a lot of money doing it. And I've always loved what I do. I love being in business and being an entrepreneur. I love being in Parliament. I love my academic life. I feel lucky I've been given the opportunity to experience all these things. And also, you've also got to have this attitude of constantly wanting to learn and being curious. This concept of the growth mindset. The learning never ever stops. And one, I believe, got to be constantly curious all through your life. It's always against all the odds when you start in business. Invariably, you have an idea, but you have little or no means, and you've got all the odds stacked against you, and then you've got to make it happen. And of course, the important thing is to make it happen with the right values and in the right way. I mean, it is better to fail doing the right thing than to succeed doing the wrong thing. The challenges are going to be there from the beginning. So first, you've got to cross the credibility gap. When you start, nobody knows you, nobody knows your brand. You have zero credibility. So how do you persuade people to buy your product? How do you persuade people to supply you? How do you persuade people to finance you? How do you persuade people to invest in you? How do you persuade people to work with you? And when you have zero credibility, you are able to do those things if you have the passion, the faith, and the confidence in yourself, in your idea, in your brand, because that gives people the faith to trust you, to give you a chance. So it's all about that belief that is infectious. And it's so important that with that determination, with being in a position of zero credibility, you can start something from scratch against all the odds. The first 5 to 6 years in our business were the most difficult in getting the business off the ground. Raising finance was always a huge challenge, particularly as my business partner and I had no money of our own. I, in fact, had student debt to pay off from my studies. We had to raise every pound along the way. And we raised money through lots of different sources, of every form of finance that we could. That was always a huge challenge, was raising the money. And you'd constantly be running out of money. And you have no collateral to offer, you have no security to offer. And it's when you I remember one day we literally I looked at my wallet and there were pennies in my wallet. All our bank accounts were over their limits. All our credit cards were up to their limit. You run out of money. How are we going to survive the next day? And you go to sleep and you wake up the next day and you find a way forward. And that's what it's all about. It's this attitude of never giving up. The old Churchillian saying of never give up, never ever give up. Once you know your product is going to succeed, and I knew that from the beginning with Cobra Beer because we got regular repeat orders. 99% of the restaurants we first sold Cobra to repeat order. Customers love the product. So when you have that confidence, you keep going. You find a way to keep going because you have your mission of building a global beer brand. You have your dream, you have your target that you're working towards. As long as you believe in that and it's credible that you can do it and achieve it, you find ways of raising the money, you build your team, and you make it happen. And you overcome the challenges and the obstacles along the way. Yes, St. Cross is a wonderful college with students. It's postgraduate only college with students from over 60 countries, which is tremendous when you have a mini United Nations. And with Cobra, when I built it from scratch, it was two of us when we started, and then we started to build a team. And I think what's very important with entrepreneurial growth is one of the main barriers to entrepreneurial companies growing is the entrepreneur himself or herself, because entrepreneurs often find it difficult to let go and to delegate. And you have to let go, you have to build a team. And ideally, you build a team of people who are at the job they do much better than you could ever be. So your sales people have got to be better salespeople than you are. Your marketing manager's got to be better marketing than you are. Your finance director has got to be much better at finance than you are. So everyone's got to be the best at what they do, better than you could do yourself. And then you build a great team. And then the more diverse the team is, the better. Deloitte has done surveys that show very clearly that more diverse teams are more innovative. And I saw that with Cobra. We built a mini United Nations of individuals from different countries, different backgrounds, different mindsets, different cultures. You put that all together and you get a genuine buzz, and you then allow them to flourish. And you create that environment for them to come up with ideas, fail sometimes, succeed. And if they fail, learn from the failure and move on. And that environment I found is far, far more effective than an environment that is not diverse. And I feel that my own background, being a Zoroastrian Parsi, I come from the smallest minority community in the world. There are just 100,000 Parsis in the whole world. And people say, who are Parsis? And I say, have you heard of Freddie Mercury of Queen? Oh yes, he was a Parsi. Have you heard of the Tatas, the famous company that owns Jaguar Land Rover and Tata Steel? Oh yes, they're Parsis. So Subin Mehta, the famous conductor. So we are a small community, but have done very well. And being brought up in India, being equally at home in the UK and India, coming from a small minority community, I feel gives me a huge advantage. And I feel really proud to be a Zoroastrian Parsi. I'm proud to be a nation in Britain. I'm proud to be an Indian, and I'm proud to be British. And having these multiple identities, and if you're very clear of who you are, where you come from, and you have pride in it, I think that's a big advantage. I think the way the world has changed over the last few decades is it is so easy now to travel around the world. Take India, for example. There are now several direct flights a day from the UK to several cities in India. It's very easy to get out to India. And similarly around the world, travel is so much more accessible and easier. Communications, since the advent of the internet, it's phenomenal how much is available at your fingertips to everybody anywhere in the world. So I think that ability to travel, that ability to communicate in such a powerful way means that you have to have a global outlook. And I say to school children, I say to university students, I say to people starting out in business or big corporates or entrepreneurial companies, think global from day one, because the world is your market and it's limitless. The opportunities are limitless. When I started Cobra, as soon as I could, even in those days, it was pre-internet days, the first thing I wanted to do was to export my beer. And I started importing it from India and then selling it to countries in Europe, because I knew I had to be global. And that mindset has to be there, and that approach has to be there. I've nearly lost my business 3 times. Each time was very different. Each time I did not predict the crisis that caused my business to nearly fail. But 3 things got me through each time, and those 3 things were identical. One was having a strong brand. The Cobra brand was very resilient throughout each of the crises. Second was having the support of a very loyal team. And to this day, I have members of my team who've been with me almost from day one. And without their support, I wouldn't be here talking to you. And if you have a family, the support of your family. I met my wife 1 year after I started Cobra Beer, and she's been by my side through this whole journey and all the challenges. And without her support, I would not be here talking to you. And third thing is integrity. you've got to, as we say in Britain, play with a straight bat. It's better to fail doing the right thing than to succeed doing the wrong thing. Integrity is the most important word. And the best definition of integrity that I ever heard was when the then Archbishop of Canterbury, Rowan Williams, now my colleague Lord Williams in the House of Lords, visited the Zoroastrian Centre in Harrow in London. And I gave the opening speech to welcome him as patron of the community. And then he spoke, and in his lecture he said, Lord Bilimoria used the word integrity 3 times. And the Zoroastrian community, the Zoroastrian Parsis, are renowned for their integrity. The word integrity comes from the Latin and Greek words integer, integrum, which mean wholeness. You cannot practice integrity if you're fragmented in front of the light. You can only practice integrity if you're complete and whole. And I've never forgotten that. So a strong brand, team and family support, and integrity, and you can get through any crisis. I was president of the Confederation of British Industry, the CBI, from 2020 to 2022. In 2 of the proudest years in my career. I was one of the youngest ever presidents of CBI. I was the first ethnic minority president of the CBI. I was the first entrepreneur to be president of CBI. And I was the first active member of the House of Lords to be president of the CBI. And what I learned when I was president was the responsibility, particularly out of being president during the biggest global crisis since the Second World War, the global pandemic. The COVID pandemic followed immediately by the start of Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the Ukraine war, and the energy crisis and the supply crisis and the inflation that resulted. So I was a crisis president, and being in that position of leadership of British industry at that time was hugely challenging, but something I look back on with pride. Because if you take the attitude then that you want to help, you want to challenge government, get government on side to help British industry, it was tough and difficult, but I was able to do it. And one of the things I wanted to champion was diversity. And we set up Change the Race Ratio, which is an initiative that I'm now president of, which many institutions, some of the biggest companies in the world have signed up to promote ethnic minority diversity in their leadership, in executives, directors, in promoting ethnic pay gap reporting. Sadly, there is an ethnicity pay gap. It shouldn't exist, but it's there, and it should be transparent and reported. And most importantly, promoting inclusion, because diversity without inclusion is useless. So I'm very proud of instituting and initiating Change the Race Ratio and promoting diversity within business. If you look back 16 years ago, to 2008, we had the global financial crisis, followed by austerity, followed by Brexit, followed by the global pandemic, followed by the Ukraine war, followed by the energy crisis and the supply chain crisis, followed by high inflation, followed by the cost of living crisis, followed by, and including throughout this period, political turmoil where the UK had 5 prime ministers in 8 years. And then the conflict and the tragedy of October the 7th and what's followed in the Middle East. So global uncertainty on a scale that we've never known. One crisis after another, one challenge after another, facing businesses, facing people all around the world. That is the backdrop of a 16-year period. And it's the reality of facing challenges. And one of the case studies I remember at Harvard Business School was learning about the Stockdale paradox. The Stockdale paradox was about Admiral Stockdale, who was taken as a Vietnam prisoner of war. And he was imprisoned in very cruel conditions. And when he was released and he got home, they said, "How did you survive when most of the people who were captured with you didn't make it. And he said, well, I summarize it as this. There were those who were over optimistic and thought, I'm going to get home by Christmas. And Christmas would come and they wouldn't be home. And they were not able to take that disappointment. And they didn't make it. So the others just could not physically and mentally take the torture and the pain and the cruelty. And they didn't make it. He said, in my case, every single day I woke up knowing it would be a nightmare and knowing that I would face horror. But side by side, I knew that one day I would make it out of here, and I had the faith that I would make it out of here. So it's that combination of facing the horror of today combined with the hope and faith of tomorrow that is key. And I think that is what we've got to go through, is face the reality, face the challenges, but have the faith and belief that we're going to make it through. When I was a child, I was told that I was not creative. And it was based on a couple of things. I was useless at art. I couldn't draw. If you go and visit my mother in India, in her sitting room, you see the finest china she's collected from around the world, and amongst that is an ugly pottery angel, the ugliest angel you've seen in your life, made by me as a boy. That was proof that I was supposedly not creative. I passed grade 1 in my piano, and I was then told, please spare us, you're tone deaf, not creative. So I grew up throughout my studies in my youth being told and believing I was not creative. And it's only when I started in business and becoming an entrepreneur that I realized that actually I'm very creative. And being creative is the most important skill of being a successful entrepreneur. And in fact, is one of the most important skills in life. So I urge the government to encourage creativity in our children from a very young age, to unleash that creative spirit that exists within all of us. In that way, the productivity of our country will increase multifold. And I just wish we would encourage everyone to be creative and innovative. And of course, if you look back historically, the United Kingdom as a country has a history of being one of the most innovative and creative countries in the world in every field, whether it's creating almost every famous sport in the world, to the greatest scientific achievements, to art in every form. This country is brilliant at it. Starting your own business is not to be taken lightly. Invariably, if I give a lecture to a school children or to university students and I say, how many of you want to start your own business one day? The vast majority of hands go up. How many of them actually will start their own business one day? It takes guts to do it. And it's a decision that needs to be taken seriously. So on the one hand, I would say it's not going to be easy. And sadly, most businesses fail and they don't succeed. On the other hand, go for it. Give it a chance. And the younger you do it, the better. And my attitude was I started in my 20s. I had no family, no mortgage, no commitments. I had my education behind me. I always say, if you're in education, complete your education, because you always have that as a fallback. And I knew I could always fall back on my qualifications and I could always get a job. But take that risk to be an entrepreneur. It is such a rewarding, exciting learning experience. And you might fail, but you could also succeed. And if you succeed, it is terrific. One of my favorite sayings is, good judgment comes from experience, and experience comes from bad judgment. There is no shortcut to making the mistakes. However much you might go to business school or learn in the classroom, when you're on the ground, you make mistakes. And you've got to learn from those mistakes and hopefully not repeat them, but grow from them. And I've made so many mistakes. And one of the mistakes I made was we focused on growing our business and rapid growth, because I knew that to create a valuable beer brand, a fast-moving consumer good, has to have critical mass. You need to sell not just thousands of bottles or hundreds of thousands of bottles. You need to sell millions and millions and tens and hundreds of millions of bottles to be a successful beer brand. And I needed growth. And I sacrificed profit for growth continually for many, many years. We grew 18 years at 40% compound per year for 18 years, making losses and no profits. And that meant that I built up a lot of debt. That meant when the financial crisis came, I nearly lost my business. And the lesson learned was at any stage I could have slowed down my growth and proven the profitability of the business, which I've done subsequently for the past 15 years. And I could have done that at any time before, and I didn't, because I was too focused on growth. And really, it should be a balance of growth and profits. So that's just one example of the mistakes that I've made, many, many mistakes on this journey. The best lecture that I ever attended was given by Professor Clay Christensen at Harvard Business School. It was the final lecture before I became an alumnus of Harvard Business School. And his lecture was, what is the purpose of your life and how are you going to measure your life? And I think that's a question everyone should ask themselves on a regular basis. What is the purpose of my life? How am I going to measure my life? And the more I reflect on that, I realize that I'm a beneficiary of my father, the late General Bilimoria, being a great leader and seeing from the time of my earliest memories as an officer, as he progressed through from being a colonel to a brigadier to general, what a great leader he was, and learning leadership skills from him firsthand. But also my mother's grandfather, my great-grandfather, who was an entrepreneur, a philanthropist, a great public servant, and a member of the House of Lords in India. So in many ways, I've followed in the footsteps of my maternal great-grandfather 4 generations later in the UK. So if I can, whatever I'm doing in my lifetime, inspire people 4 generations from now, it would have been worth it. I don't know if I'll achieve that, but I've been the beneficiary of it myself. So that would be a great legacy.